Ever two-night WWE SummerSlam takes place on Saturday and Sunday at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. We're going to make some predictions for everything on the card, but we're going to start with some quick hitter picks for matches that I don't know need as much discussion as some of the others. And we're going to start with Tiffany Stratton defending the WWE Women's Championship against Jade Cargill. This has been one where it's kind of like you have two baby faces, it's the best woman win, and to me, everything they've been building towards is for Jade Cargill to get her sort of shining moment as the champion. We've talked about what that could mean for future storylines with Bianca Belair and Naomi, but I think now is probably the time. After Jade won the Queen of the Ring, I think this is probably the opportunity for her to win the championship, have a potential shining moment, her first big sort of defining moment in WWE outside of winning that tournament, and I think she does that here. So I'm going to pick Jade Cargill to beat Tiffany Stratton. The other match that I think seems pretty straightforward, Randy Orton and Jelly Roll against Drew McIntyre and Logan Paul. Of course, the big story here is whether Drew McIntyre is actually going to be at SummerSlam. You guys saw the video, I'm sure, about McIntyre being stranded in the UK, and all that kind of stuff. So don't really know how this plays out, but I do feel like no matter what, the winner is probably going to be Randy Orton and Jelly Roll. Seems kind of counterproductive, I know, for some people, because it's like, well, surely you can have Jelly Roll take the pin here, right? It's WWE, it's a celebrity-driven match. I think it probably is one of those where you want that moment where Orton and Jelly Roll are standing tall at the end to give you kind of all those photo ops and everything like that. So I'm going to pick Randy Orton and Jelly Roll, whether it's against McIntyre and Paul or against someone else potentially and Logan Paul, even though I'd like to see Drew McIntyre maybe in a better spot here. And I don't think in any scenario is McIntyre taking the pin. We go to night 2 for another quick hitter pick here, and that is going to be AJ Styles challenging Dominic Mysterio for the Intercontinental Championship. In all honesty, I think since Dominic has won the title, there hasn't been a lot in terms of just, momentum behind these Intercontinental title defenses, right? It's been more about the whole dynamic within Judgment Day with Dominic and Roxanne Perez. I feel like this is a good time doing all the vignettes they did with AJ Styles playing all these different professional roles. I think now is probably the opportunity where you were waiting and waiting for Dominic to finally get cleared and all this other stuff. I think putting the title on Styles makes a lot of sense. It gives you kind of some fresh ideas to work with in terms of matches and all that kind of stuff, especially given, I think, the state of the roster on Raw. So I like the idea of AJ Styles winning the title here, even though I think Dominic is actually the favorite in terms of the betting odds. But I like Styles winning here, and I think you can kind of play into something with Dominic losing, and maybe Roxanne Perez is there with some chicken tenders and Liv Morgan is not. And how does that play into perhaps Roxanne helping Dominic heal from losing the championship? And then another quick hitter pick here. We're going to go with the TLC match, the 6-tag team showdown, as the Wyatt Six will defend those titles in that match against the Street Profits, the Motor City Machine Guns, DIY, Fraxium, and Andrade and Rey Fenix. Honestly, I think this is one that's pretty wide open. I would think that there is a scenario where the Wyatt Six could retain here. I think it's one where you could put the titles on Fraxium to give them kind of a potential shining moment here. I don't know necessarily if it goes right back to the Street Profits or if the Motor City Machine Guns get them back. I think DIY is an interesting possibility to have teams maybe chasing them as the heel winners could be a possibility. But I'll tell you, there's something about this Andrade and Rey Fenix team, and I think in a ladder match scenario, I could see WWE leaning into this and really going with the idea that these are guys that they want to get behind. They just did those, vignettes with them where they're kind of really boasting the idea that this is, a tag team and it's kind of a fresh thing. It's not just two random guys paired together. They're kind of out on a mission and a goal. And I think you kind of want to reward Andrade, who's done some pretty good work, I think, since he returned to WWE. He was in the Money in the Bank ladder match. I think Rey Fenix, they obviously have high expectations for him. Eventually you would think he will reunite with Penta, but it's not necessary right now. So I think having Fenix and Andrade in a tag team, given the matches they've had so far, I'm going to go with Andrade and Rey Fenix to maybe score what may be a bit of an upset win in some people's eyes here. But I think it probably comes down to either them or Fraxium for me getting those opportunities. All right. Now we're going to go into the bigger predictions for the other matches that may need a little bit more time as a whole. Let's start with Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss challenging Roxanne Perez and Raquel Rodriguez for the women's tag team titles. This really does tie into what we just talked about a little bit with the men's tag team titles on the SmackDown side. And that is a team that has come together and maybe exceeded expectations. When they started this whole thing with Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss, I know some people were wondering, are they really going to be able to pull this off? It's kind of a unique dynamic between those two, not used to necessarily seeing them in a tag team setting and all that. Are they really going to be able to pull this off? Well, I said when they got merch, you knew that was a good sign. They were going to try to keep this team together. And I know there were some rumors out there that the original plan was to have these two in a singles match, which would have made sense. One turns on the other, and you go with that. But I said, as you guys know, coming out of Evolution, I just don't think there is a scenario right now where you can break these two up. I don't think this is one where you have one partner turn on the other. I just don't think that's a good idea. I think you've got to roll with this. And I mentioned that kind of with the Andrade Rey Fenix thing. It's working, and this is working to a much bigger extent. And I think you have to go with this idea that the crowd will cheer Charlotte just as they did at Evolution. Alexa is helping that dynamic, and you're facing these two heels who are part of, one of the top heel factions in the company. I think this is a absolute no-brainer pick. I think Charlotte and Alexa win the championships here. I think they have to, and I think that will do wonders for kind of the state of where the tag team titles are right now. There's nothing against, what Roxanne and Raquel have been doing with Liv Morgan's absence. It's worked pretty well. But I think this gives that tag team division a little bit something extra by having these two. And remember, too, that also gives them the idea where they can go to Raw and, be on SmackDown and all that. So I like having these two with the titles. And to me, this feels like, I don't want to say the most predictable one on the card because I don't think predictable is the right word. I think it's the best choice on the card in terms of like really your hard argument as to why one person should win or the other person should win. I think Charlotte and Alexa need to win the titles here. I hope it's not a scenario where one turns on the other. I just don't like that. I think they need to stay together because I think it benefits both of them right now. So give me Charlotte and Alexa winning the championships. All right, I go down the card here. Sami Zayn and Karrion Kross, a matchup that we know is going to be kind of part 3 in their trilogy here. Zayn won the first one. Karrion Kross won the second one. And now this seems like the blow-off match. You've probably also seen the teases from Karrion Kross on his social media, which seem to really hint at the idea that he may be done with WWE after SummerSlam. And, I was thinking about this. I'm like, could this be a work, which we ask about a lot of things right now, and I'm sure there's something else we'll mention in a minute that ties into that. But I think with Karrion Kross, it's one where if this is sort of the end for him in WWE right now, I think you've kind of been in a position where for him personally, it is something where you have raised your stock so much that no matter what happens, right, you're going to probably be in a position where you're going to have a lot of opportunity. And it did, again, seem like that he's kind of hinting at that idea that this may be it. You can go check out his social media post and all that about sort of, the TikTok stuff, and kind of did the video with Kevin Sullivan saying how good he was and all this other stuff, and how Kevin Sullivan was basically talking about he didn't know what WWE was doing with him. So for him to put something like that out, I think kind of tells you something. Again, could just be completely working us, but I'm not sold on that in this scenario, which of course means I think Sami Zayn's going to get the win here. And I think this is all about Sami, who said it on Raw, is ready to move beyond Karrion Kross because Sami wants to focus on his bigger goal, and that's becoming the world champion. And I said I still think he's the front runner to win the Royal Rumble next year, go on to WrestleMania, have a chance to be a world champion for the first time. That seems like an obvious story to tell. So Sami Zayn gets the win here over Karrion Kross, but maybe the bigger prediction is that, is Karrion Kross really done with WWE? Is that maybe the scenario we see play out here? It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. All right, let's get to the other match. There's 2 more matches on night 1. That is Roman Reigns and Jey Uso against Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker. Braun against Reigns and Jey. I said on the Raw reaction show, I don't know that you could have looked any better if you're Braun Breaker or Bronson Reed coming out of Raw, where they just destroyed Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. And I feel like this is an opportunity now for them where, hey, you've kind of shown your strength here. This is a big opportunity to walk in and put on a great match with Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. You're in there with 2 of the top stars in WWE. And I think that's probably enough, right? I don't think they necessarily need to win because I think there is an idea that eventually you do that Braun Breaker Roman Reigns match. Maybe that is where Braun Breaker gets sort of a career-defining win over Reigns in a one-on-one setting. I think this is another one that feels pretty clear as to what direction they're going to head in. The super team of Reigns and Jey. Jey's coming off of losing a world championship. He kind of needs to stay in that top level. I don't think you want to have him lose here. And it's Roman Reigns, right? We mentioned the dynamic of if it would have been Reigns versus Breaker, if it would have been, maybe Reigns versus Rollins or something, you could have seen Reigns losing again in that scenario potentially, but in a tag team match, I just don't see it. I think this is probably a Roman Reigns Jey Uso victory. But I think, the bigger story coming out of it is how does this look for Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed? And do we get a little bit step closer at some point later this year, maybe a WrestleMania match next year with Roman Reigns and Braun Breaker? Because I think that's another one that makes a lot of sense. All right. The main events, I would assume, I think they've announced that, right? That it will be CM Punk challenging Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship on night one. And look, I said this is really about the best in the world versus the best in the world, right? That's how Punk sort of tried to phrase it in his promo on Raw. And while this should be a really good match, because it's one that I think we've been waiting to get to for a while now, the whole story here is going to be Seth Rollins. And I think that I'm going to stick with that the prediction involves Seth Rollins being here in some way and him potentially cashing in on either Punk or Gunther. And I think that's the story. And I know we still are going back and forth on is it real, is it not real, all that stuff. But I think, like I've mentioned, the fact that they've kept his name sort of in these segments, and you've had Heyman reiterating multiple times that Rollins will be out for an extended amount of time, I think that was on purpose. I think that was to lead us astray, to make us just kind of look at it as a throwaway line where, all right, yep, Rollins going to be out for a bit. And then we're just not even prepared whenever this guy shows up. And maybe it is a scenario where Punk wins and Rollins is there to ruin his moment. Or maybe Punk is near victory, Rollins is there, ruins the moment, still cashes in and wins the title. The only thing that holds me back from having a real strong opinion on this is that at this point, doesn't it seem predictable? It may seem predictable to us, the people who are talking about this all day, every day. But to your casual WWE fan and to, thousands upon thousands of fans that are going to be there for SummerSlam, I don't think that the large percentage of that crowd is going to see this necessarily as predictable, because the way they played it up, as we said, they have presented this as a real injury with very few details, and if you don't have those details, you can't question them. And I think that's where we're at. So even though it feels predictable, my bigger prediction here is that Seth Rollins is going to cash in on someone. I do think that, again, it's predictable, but I'm like Punk winning with maybe like a quick pinfall, a little flash pinfall finish, something like that to really shock Gunther. That may be the way you go, and Punk is celebrating. He's become the champion, but Rollins is there to ruin the day. I think that is kind of where I stand on that. So I'm gonna go with Punk winning the match. I don't really have a strong opinion on that. I could see them going either way on both of these, potential winners, but I do think it is one where I just feel like this is the moment you're setting up for with Seth Rollins, although maybe they're like, you know what, at this point it's too predictable, let's do it on the Raw after or something like that. That's also a potential possibility. But Rollins' whole thing has been he's never going to allow Punk to be the champion. So maybe he doesn't allow him to be the champion, still finds a way to cash in, or maybe Punk does it and Rollins is like, I got to get there to be able to cash in on him. So, all right, more predictions. The triple threat match, the Women's World Championship. Naomi defends against Rhea Ripley and Io Sky. And we know they kind of revisited the whole thing with Rhea and Io Sky on Raw this week about how Io's saying, you're never going to beat me. Rhea's saying, I'm going to beat you. Like, at some point, Rhea's got to beat her, right? But I think adding that story in, that rivalry is still a big part of this, while you're also adding in the story of, yes, Naomi cashed in on both of these two at Evolution. My whole thinking here is that it just feels way too early if you were going to have that sort of defining moment for Naomi to end what I said I think is the best WWE PLE this year. I don't think you want to just get the title off of her several weeks later. And again, does that make it feel a little too obvious? Perhaps, but I think you want to go into Clash in Paris. Naomi versus Stephanie Vaquer, I think, is a big match just because you have a clearly defined heel on one side, although Naomi's going to get a lot of cheers, I still think, because she's doing such great work. And you've got just this rising superstar in Stephanie Vaquer. And so I think that's the match. I mean, certainly Stephanie Vaquer versus Io Sky, we've seen it a couple times now. That's probably not happening. Stephanie Vaquer versus Rhea Ripley, I mean, that's probably a match. No offense to people going to Clash in Paris, but that's probably a match WWE sees as a bigger PLE type match. Whether that's a WrestleMania, a Royal Rumble, something like that, those are all possibilities, right? So I think Naomi versus Vaquer is the direction, which means Naomi wins this match. And as I've said many times this year, WWE is hitting a very high percentage on the triple threat matches on the women's side this year. And so I think this should be, once again, one of the better matches of the weekend. Would not be shocked at all by that, given the three talents involved. All right, now we go to the Intercontinental Championship match on the women's side, as it is going to be Becky Lynch defending against Lyra Valkyria. And I think this is another one of those matches where you've added stipulations, right? Matches that we've seen before. It's a very stipulation-heavy night on night 2, as you're going to see from these next couple matches. We've already talked about the tag team match. It's a ladder match, all that. But this is one where it's Becky, basically not wanting Lyra to challenge for the title again, and it's Lyra saying, hey, this is going to be anything goes. No count out, no DQ. There must be a winner. And I know all the double turn talk, which I'm sure we'll talk about in just a minute for the main event, is surrounding that match. But I think this is another one where I would not be shocked at all if we get some sort of development like that involving these two, because I do think there is going to be a crowd in East Rutherford, New Jersey, who is going to cheer Becky Lynch and potentially boo Lyra Valkyria. And as Becky said, she's got the bruises to show the all the kendo stick attacks from Lyra on Raw. And I think there is kind of a possibility where you come out of this with both of those women in different spots. Even though Becky is kind of knocked the fans and all this other stuff, you can easily change that. And so I think this is one where, Lyra maybe takes it to a level because it is no DQ. And this is kind of be the theme of the main event too. I'm going to be honest with you. I see some similar dynamics between this match and the main event, but you see Lyra maybe take it to a level that you didn't expect. She even said as much on Raw. She will take this to a level no one maybe has seen her take it to before. But I think the wild card here is Bayley, because Bayley was very dejected, as we saw on Raw, saying she missed WrestleMania, she missed SummerSlam. So how does Bayley factor into this? Could we see Bayley make the turn? All those kind of things. I think it's possible. But I think no matter what here, I think Lyra is winning the championship back from Becky, and I think that leads you into a fresh direction for everyone, where maybe it's a heel Lyra as the champion, maybe Becky goes back into getting into the world championship picture, which I could see, being something that would be very valuable at that point. And so maybe Bayley is also kind of, once again, factored in here with one of these women coming out of it. So I'm going to go Lyra Valkyria winning the Intercontinental Championship. All right, the Steel Cage match. Solo Sikoa defends against Jacob Fatu, the United States title on the line here. I'll be honest, I don't know about this one. I am pretty not sold on a confident pick, because I think this is one where you're looking at it still. Does Jacob Fatu need the United States title? Not necessarily right. I just don't think it's necessary. I think Solo winning it was not that long ago now. And maybe it was one where it would made for a better story to have Fatu chase. But the more I think about it, I'm just like, there are so many things you can do with Jacob Fatu coming out of this, but I don't know if that means he's going to get into the undisputed WWE title picture or anything like that. But I do think this is one where you have all the people on the outside. Tala Tonga, like I said, ripping off the cage door. I can already see that visual. If that's a possibility, maybe they do that. You've got Tongaloa, you've got JC, and then, you've got Jimmy Uso, who's probably going to be there with Jacob Fatu. You've got the potential return of a Tama Tonga. Like I said, I don't think Jey Uso gets involved here, just based on kind of the story, but you never know. Their matches night 1, night 2, you never know. But I just, with all the outside elements, I don't really know exactly what to expect here. I think your normal thinking is that Jacob Fatu probably wins this, because it feels like the blow-off match, right? And if that's the case, then Jacob Fatu winning is probably something that makes a lot of sense. But if he does that, where do you go with Solo from here, right? Because he's just finally won a big match, and now he just loses that quickly. So I am pretty much 50-50 on this match. I think you could tell a lot of different stories. I think you could still be looking ahead and say this could be a War Games match months down the road. I think I will go with Jacob Fatu just because I'm like, steel cage match, blow off, the babyface wins, but man, I don't know. Just all the outside elements. So yeah, don't take that one as a strong prediction, because I just don't really have one for this match, other than I know we're going to have outside interference, even though it's a cage match, but that's kind of where I stand on this one. You guys may have a better thought than I do on how you see this playing out. All right, that is going to lead us into the main event. Cody Rhodes, John Cena, the undisputed WWE Championship. My mind has sort of changed on this match a little bit over the past couple of weeks, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. The whole double turn, as I said, is going to be talked about. And if that happens, I think you've got to have The Rock involved. The final boss he's got to be on there, right? That's pretty much how it's going to go. And speaking of the final boss, if you guys have watched WWE Unreal yet, yes, I will drop a quick plug. You can hear my voice from our channel here, Wrestling Reaction, kind of doing a little bit of a voiceover for one of the segments on episode 4, where they're talking about Cody Rhodes and, The Rock and selling souls and all this other stuff. So you can check that out. I don't know, it's maybe like 6-7 minutes into the show, something like that. When The Rock turns around, you get a WrestleOps tweet on the screen. You can hear my voice kind of talking about how there's more questions than answers coming out of that whole segment with The Rock trying to convince Cody to sell his soul. If he factors into this, and to me it's one of those where usually around this time there's a lot of rumors and all that, but it's eerily quiet about The Rock. And I think that this could be a situation where you kind of make up for what happened at WrestleMania 41, because clearly they've had a falling out with Travis Scott. Travis Scott's not going to be there. So do you make up for it by having The Rock here? But I said, I don't know if WWE is ready to turn Cody just yet. I do think the fans, at least a good chunk of the fans, could turn Cody on this show one night only, because I think Cena's going to get a lot of cheers. And to get Cena back to the good side, I think this could be one, because it's a street fight. Cody, just like he did against Kevin Owens, takes this to a level that you don't expect. And just like I talked about maybe with Lyra and Becky Lynch, I think you could see that where you're like, wait a second, Cody did those things to Kevin Owens. He did it to Randy Orton, took advantage of the back issues, the exposed turnbuckle to win the King of the Ring, and now he's going to do this to John Cena. You're setting up something in motion for down the road. And I don't know, again, you're just going to get a hard Cody turn here. The only way I think that happens is if The Rock is involved. So if The Rock's there, the final boss is there, then maybe we get the soul is finally sold, right? But I don't know about that, but I do think my mind has changed from where I thought Cena winning was the right move to where now I honestly wonder if Cody winning is the better move, because then you come out of it with Cody entering a different direction where you're kind of questioning him a little bit more, and you also have John Cena almost all the way, if not all the way, back to the good side. And that can set up your final sort of arc for Cena. What does he do now? How does he finish this retirement tour without the championship? Because that was his whole goal, was that he was going to be the last real champion. And that's where I think you have someone like Gunther who eventually swoops in, and maybe, you kind of have that set up there with him somehow. And that does kind of make me wonder about the whole Punk, Gunther, Rollins dynamic, because I think if you are going to do Cena versus Gunther as Cena's final match in December, I would think you want Gunther to have a championship. Maybe Cena with the possibility of actually retiring as a champion by beating Gunther. That could be something. I'm going to pick Cody to win, and I don't know that I expected to do that several weeks ago, but now I do think that probably is something where you could see that play out, and I think there's something interesting here that's going to go down, because it's your Night 2 main event. You can't do the same thing you did at WrestleMania 41. And the street fight element adds a lot more unpredictability to what they're going to do here. But I'm fascinated to see how it goes down. But I'm going to pick Cody to win the championship back from John Cena. All right, there are my predictions. You guys let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Give me your predictions for Night 1 and Night 2. Bold predictions, if you will, for WWE SummerSlam.